I am not a treasure hunter. I'm not an Indiana Jones, raiding the lost ark. So, and also I'm trained to be an archaeologist of the Levant. This is what I know.
How has your academic and personal journey influenced your approach to archaeology and the interpretation of ancient texts?
I have always been interested in history. It started very early when I was in high school. My parents thought that I will be a scientist in the sense of doing physics or mathematics. I was not too bad in that. But my interest was not there. My interest was in history. And I came to archaeology because of that. I saw then and I see now archaeology as some sort of a profession which illuminates history. So when people ask me, what do you do? What is your profession? Usually my answer is historian practicing archaeology.
You studied under prominent figures in your university education. How did their mentorship shape your early career and research focus?
I would refer to several, important figures. First of all, Israelis such as Yohanan Aharoni, who was my teacher here at Tel Aviv. Moshe Kochavi, I wrote my PhD with him. My good friend Nadav Ne'eman, who was my teacher many years ago for a while, and then we became really very good friends and close friends, and we have the same ways, sort of looking at biblical history. And then at a certain point in my career, I met Iga Eliadin in the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He invited me to participate in a research group of his in the 80s, in the early 80s. And this was an influential year with a figure so important as Yadin, who was the most prominent archaeologist at that time here in Israel. And of course, maybe we'll speak about it later, there are scholars whom I never met who really influenced my research in different ways.
Del Megiddo has been central to your work. What are some of the most surprising finds from your excavations there, and how have they challenged previous historical narratives?
The importance of Megiddo and my most important contribution while excavating at Megiddo is in establishing a proper stratigraphic chronological structure at the site. I think we are doing something very unique at Megiddo. First of all, Megiddo is important because it is some sort of the center for any discussion on biblical history, also on the Bronze Age. For the Bronze and Iron Ages, Megiddo is still the most important site in Israel and, in fact, in the Levant. And there were points there which were chaotic after past excavations by Germans and by the University of Chicago and by Yadin himself later. My goal was to fix the stratigraphy properly, then to fix the ceramic typology, which means relative chronology properly, and then to establish absolute chronology by really investing a lot in radiocarbon dating. And I think that this is the most important contribution because when you deal with chronology, you contribute in every period. Now I'm working on the Middle Bronze Age. Before we published an article on the Late Bronze Age, and these articles, and of course the Iron Age, several articles, and this became, the backbone of the chronology of the Bronze and Iron Ages, and by that also the backbone for historical reconstruction, the history of the region, starting around 3000 BC and continuing until what's the 4th century BC.
You've led numerous archaeological digs across Israel. Can you share a particular memorable or challenging experience from the field?
I think that the challenges there were different challenges, depends what site and what region we are speaking about. Indeed, the survey was a challenge because, first of all, it was very tiring. I mean, I used to go with my students back in the 80s, that was, to the field twice a week. Part of this time I was still writing my PhD. I finished my PhD in 1983. So part of it, I was still going to the field twice a week and then also writing the articles and my PhD. So this was quite a challenge. And then There were other challenges that I remember. First of all, the work in the Negev at Tel Ira many years ago. I worked in the Sinai Peninsula on also conducted surveys. This was a challenge from the organization point of view, even how to reach the sites. Then in recent years, another challenge, I excavated together with my friend Thomas Romer from the Collège de France, the site of Kiryat Yearim near Jerusalem. And that was another type of a challenge because the site is today a monastery. And of course, nobody wanted, even us, to disturb the peaceful life of the nuns at the site. So there was some sort of negotiation and fruitful and productive and nice with the monastery, with the authorities in order to obtain the permission from them to carry out excavations there. And then it was conducted in a very friendly way.
Your book, The Bible Unearthed, has had a significant impact on the mainstream world of archaeology. What inspired you to write it, and how do you feel about the reception in both academic circles and the general public?
Writing The Bible Unearthed was really a very important endeavor from my point of view. I did it with my good friend Neil Asher Silberman. We did it together, and Neil really a wonderful thinker, and I had a good time doing this with him. The importance of the book is in breaking the news to the public, so to speak. We felt at the time that there is a big accumulation of knowledge about biblical research, about archaeology, about the history of ancient Israel, which is some sort of secluded to the ivory towers of the universities. And the idea was to deliver the news to the public. This was the aim of the book. And I think that we really succeeded in doing that because it was really well received, and also from the point of view of number of books sold and so on. So it became really a bestseller in several places, and we were very happy about that. We thought that this is important to include the public in the cycle of people who know something about the past, who contribute to the knowledge, to deciphering the past.
Do you think archaeology should transcend purely academic discourse and actively engage a broader audience?
I absolutely think that our task, important task, is to break the news to the public, to inform the public about the results of research. And I'm doing this now more and more. In recent years, I've been doing my YouTube interviews, the Shmonis Conversations on Bible and Archaeology. I did several pieces with Thomas Romer, and in Hebrew I do quite a lot. I do a podcast. Now I myself interview others at Haifa, University of Haifa, where I'm working now. And I think that this is very important, and we have today the means to do this in an easy way. Not necessarily always in books, also by using other media such as podcasts and YouTube clips.
Some say that you propose that a Hebrew Bible is a product of human imagination rather than a factual historical account. Can you elaborate on how this view shaped your approach to archaeology?
Well, I think that there are two ways to look at the biblical history. Now we are speaking about the historical parts in the Bible. So that is to say, certain parts of the Torah, of the Pentateuch, and of course the Deuteronomistic history, and then later Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles. There are two ways to look at them. First way is to simply read the text and understand it in a traditional way. I fully respect this way of looking at the text. This is not my way. I think that the better way to look at the text is to look at it from a critical point of view. And this does not downplay whatsoever the importance of the Bible, my respect to the text, my affection to the text, my understanding of the importance of this text, the Bible, to my own culture and to Western civilization, if you wish. But I think that looking at the text in a critical way, in fact, improves our understanding of the Bible, and in fact, is, in my opinion, a better way for reconstructing history. Because what I am doing, I'm not dismissing the importance of the Bible. My attitude is the following: I'm in the middle somewhere between those who accept every word traditionally and those who dismiss everything. My way of looking at the biblical text is to look at every single text independently and look at archaeology, look at extra biblical texts, Assyrian, Egyptian, Babylonian, and so on, in order to shed light on the Bible and then formulate an idea. And especially, I'm looking at historiography, which means the goals, the aims of the authors when they put together these compositions. What exactly did they try to transmit? What exactly do they try to tell us in the text, and why? Because I think that the why also illuminates their own world, even when they speak about ancient times, before their own time.
What do you see as the biggest challenge and opportunity for the next generation of archaeologists, particularly biblical archaeologists?
First of all, archaeology is a jackpot. You can never know what will happen tomorrow. You can find an amazing find and really change the way we look at this or that period. Other than that, I think that the big questions which remain to be solved are: the first one, movement of people. This can be done by ancient DNA research, and as I mentioned before, I have been engaged in ancient DNA in recent years in different places, at Megiddo, at Kiryat Yarim as well. And we do know better about movement of people today and movement of animals, which is related to the movement of people, of course, because animals move with people. So this is important, and this is a field which is open for a revolution, so to speak, or at least accumulation of new knowledge. The second important, very important field is the question of paleoclimate. Climate, especially in this part of the world, influences history in a big way. The reason is, if you look at the map of the Levant is surrounded on one side by water, the Mediterranean, in the south by a desert, in the east by desert. So we are surrounded by deserts and the sea. So it is extremely important to investigate climate change. I remember when I came to study here at Tel Aviv University many years ago, I was taught in the first week of my studies that in the last 5,000 years, this was the slogan, in the last 5,000 years there has not been a change of climate. Now we know that this is wrong. There were changes, major changes, and we are investigating them. And this is extremely important. You take a place such as, not so much Megiddo. Take a place like Megiddo, okay, fine. Let's say that it gets 550 millimeters of rain per year, precipitation. So let's say that there is a crisis, the climate becomes drier, and it gets 450. Not a big deal. They can survive. If one goes to the main centers along the desert fringe, and these are important centers, Amon, Damascus, Aleppo, and so on. Over there, take Damascus as an example. If you cut from 300 millimeters to 200 millimeters a year, it is a disaster. And therefore, climate is very important. For instance, we managed to, in recent years, to eliminate, not only my team as well, but not only, also other teams working in the Middle East, to shed light on the crisis at the end of the Bronze Age and the involvement of climate change crisis in precipitation, a dry event of something like 100 or 150 years that really influenced the situation in a major way, brought about the collapse of the old world as we knew it, of the Bronze Age. So this is another front of research for the past. So movement of people and paleoclimate are very important. And on top of this, I would say something which is very traditional also at the same time. I think that time has come for us to retrieve either an archive for the late Bronze Age. This may happen every moment, every day. I strongly believe, if we look at the Amarna tablets, for instance, they wrote letters from here. Cuneiform in Akkadian, which was the lingua franca, the international language, the diplomatic language of the time. So, an archive for the late Bronze Age, major inscriptions for the Iron Age, similar to the Mesha stele, to the Tel Dan inscription. I want more. So this is also an important challenge for the future, but this has nothing to do with our own initiative. It's a matter of luck to come across inscriptions like this.
What upcoming projects or research and endeavors are you most excited about, and what new questions do you hope to explore?
I'm still working at Megiddo, first of all. Megiddo is an extremely important site. I describe it always, smiling, but not really, as the mother of all sites, the mother of all tales. This is the center, for understanding. I mentioned it already, the Bronze and the Iron Ages. I managed to achieve many of the goals that I had. I've been there for 30 years now. So I started the first major season was in 1994, exactly 30 years ago. So I did manage to solve many of the questions that I posed 30 years ago, but there are still other questions that need to be addressed, and me and my associates, we are going to continue, not for many years perhaps to come, we'll see, but we still have work to do at Megiddo. Secondly, my close associate and friend Thomas Romer from the Collège de France, one of the really most important biblical scholars today with us. And we are also, as I mentioned, good friends. He pushes me more and more to carry out another season at Kiryat Yarim. Kiryat Yarim is a fascinating site because it illuminates different aspects of the biblical text and different aspects of the relationship between Israel and Judah, and by that also history of this land in the Iron Age. So perhaps there will be another campaign at Kiryat Yarim. As I mentioned to you, I am doing research on, or participate in research as one in the big team on introducing algorithmic methods to the study of ancient inscriptions and ancient texts. And this is a field which is really promising. I think that it is going to revolutionize what we know about the Bible, or revolutionize and confirm, of course, also at the same time. We are checking, ideas of the giants of the past, biblical scholars, and many of the ideas are supported by what we are doing. Other ideas can be maybe perhaps challenged. And then I'm also still engaged in questions to do with ancient DNA, with, as I mentioned, paleoclimate, and several other fields of archaeosciences. Paleomagnetism is one example that I'm still doing at Megiddo, and other subjects. So life in the coming years is not going to be boring.
If you could research any ancient site without restrictions and with an unlimited funding, which site would you choose?
I am not a treasure hunter. I'm not an Indiana Jones, raiding the lost ark. And also, I'm trained to be an archaeologist of the Levant. This is what I know. This is where I was, where I studied, and this is my knowledge, the baseline, so to speak, of my knowledge. So I'm looking at sites over here. The problem is that I have a big list of sites which I want to excavate. I'm speaking about the next 200 years, something like that. I'm ready for the next 200 years. The problem is that many of the sites are not exactly available to me because of security reasons, because of the political conflicts and things like this. Let me give you one or two examples, and especially to shed light again on biblical studies and what people call biblical archaeology, if you wish, archaeology of the Iron Age, okay? Samaria. Samaria was excavated in the past by two major expeditions of Harvard University and then the joint expedition later in the 30s, so in the 20th century, and we still lack a lot of information about this wonderful site. I know the site well. I visited it many times, and I read very carefully the reports of past excavations, and I'm ready to go for 10 years of excavations at Samaria, but this is not going to happen probably. Another site, Bethel. Bethel is a crucial site for understanding biblical history. The temple that was supposedly located there, the relationship between Israel and Judah, the growth of Israelite religion and faith. These are all connected one way or the other with Bethel, and this connects to my excavations at Shiloh many years ago. So this is another example. I would love to excavate several sites in Transjordan. I'm thinking about Busera, for instance, in the Edom, which should illuminate what we know about Assyrian control in this part of the world in the 8th and 7th centuries BC, Arabian trade and things like this. I'm interested in other sites in Transjordan as well. Nebo, as an example. There is an excavation going on there right now, but this is another example. So I'm ready. I need luck to be able to do it, and I need the money, and I'm going to roam the field for the next 200 years.
What's the most revolutionary idea you proposed about ancient Israel's timeline, and how has it shaped our understanding of biblical history?
I think that I contributed, I would say humbly, that I contributed in several aspects. First of all, I'm mentioning only the main fields, okay? I contributed to the understanding of the rise of ancient Israel. I contributed in a major way to archaeological chronology, but by doing that also illuminating historical questions, the history of ancient Israel. So chronology is a major contribution. We'll probably speak about it later. I think that another contribution is in the exact and life sciences. I'm very proud to say that many of the people who work with me now have positions, young people now have positions in universities in Israel and abroad, and this is important, I think. Another field is the question of the history of the arid zones of the Levant. I was working in the Sinai, in the Negev, and I think that in recent years we managed, I was not alone here, as a team that I had headed together with Ruth Shachar-Gross and others to revolutionize what we know about the history of the arid zones surrounding the Levant in the south and in the east. So these are several examples that I should mention. The part, yes, another one is the shedding light on late biblical historiographic works such as Ezra and Nehemiah and Chronicles. I would, downdate the dates of some of the texts which can be investigated according to sites mentioned. I am downdating the dates, so this is also something which is, I think, of importance.
Your debates with other scholars, including Dr. William Deaver, some say, have been pivotal in advancing the field. How do you view these scholarly exchanges, and what impact do you think they have had on archaeology?
I think that arguments between scholars, this is a very strong Jewish tradition. Arguments are good. This is part of the study. So when we argue, if we argue properly, it is good, important, and always advances knowledge. Let me give you one example. I think the best example. I am debating time and again with my friend and colleague here, Amichai Mazar, who accepts some of my ideas and I accept some of his, and we oppose each other on other items, but this is advancing research any way you look at it. I mean, the more we argue, the more we study. This is, as I mentioned, very strong Jewish tradition of the Cheder, of studying the Torah, of going back to the same questions and looking at them from different aspects. So I am absolutely in favor of argumentations in archaeology, in biblical studies as well.
What is your perspective on the current status of the Low Chronology debate? Do you believe the issue has been settled, or is there still room for discussion?
I have no doubt, not even 1% of a doubt, that radiocarbon has proven the low chronology correct. So we're not speaking about low chronology anymore. We are speaking about chronology. Any other chronology is debated because all proper investigations, radiocarbon investigations, including by people who opposed in the beginning my views at places such as Tel Rehov, support, down dating the dates of the strata, Iron Age, certain Iron Age strata in the Levant. There's no question about it. So I'm not there anymore, to tell you the truth. I'm not interested in this anymore because I cannot, continue, to dig into the same question for the rest of my life. I want to renew my point of view. So I'm looking for other questions. I think this is a done deal.
What is one thing you wish the general public understood better about the work of archaeologists and the nature of archaeological evidence?
I think that the public should know that archaeology is becoming a very precise field, discipline, both in the ways that we work in the field, also in introducing exact and life sciences methods into archaeological research. I think that the public needs to understand that there is some sort of a tension in archaeology between describing the finds and interpretation, which means we should agree on the finds. I not always agree with my colleagues. It depends on the quality of excavations. There are colleagues whom I take for granted as precise, and I don't argue at all about the results of their excavations because they are excellent archaeologists. There are archaeologists who are not that great in the field, and then I am looking very carefully at the finds and try to study them independently in order to reach conclusions. But in any event, once we establish an understanding of the finds, we move to interpretation. Interpretation is already, let's put it this way, archaeology is more and more on the side of the exact and life sciences. Interpretation is always on the side of the humanities, on the side of historical research. And there, of course, things are open. Public should know that things are open for different ways of looking at the finds.
What advice would you give to young scholars and aspiring archaeologists who are interested in pursuing a career in this field?
To keep an open mind. This is the most important thing. First of all, to be trained properly. Secondly, to be careful very much, with what they are doing in the field, and also to keep their mind open when they come to interpret the finds. There is no one rule of doing archaeology. The one rule is proper research, both in the field and, in the lab. I think that becoming an archaeologist is wonderful. I love archaeology. I think it's a wonderful profession, a very rewarding one, because there's no dull moments. You think about, even biblical research. All new material that comes into the pot in biblical research comes from archaeology. There are no new texts, almost none. Here and there we have a new inscription, of course, but not very many. So archaeology is a very active, a very dynamic field, and this is wonderful. So he or she who gets a position, in archaeology in an academic institution is very lucky, and should enjoy his or her life. Nobody is becoming rich because of a university salary, but I cannot complain. I'm doing well. We work at the university, and also I'm happy to see that I have students, and the students have their own students. So I am now sort of, how to say it, I have been a father to many students, and now I'm a grandfather because my students have their own students already. So this is very rewarding. There is nothing more rewarding in academic life.
How do you hope your work and contributions to archaeology will be remembered and utilized by future scholars?
I can only hope that people the people first of all now read what I'm writing. I'm still writing quite a lot. I have a very long list of publications, both books and articles. I'm now working on a book which will be out soon under the title Jerusalem, Center of the Universe, which deals with the archaeology and history of Jerusalem in the second millennium and much of the first millennium BC. So I am hopeful that people read what I'm writing and will continue to read. There will be more progress in the future, there's no question about it. Some of the things that I said, I suppose, will prevail. Other ideas will need to be reformed, so to speak. This is, the nature of academic life.
Who has been your greatest inspiration or influence in your journey to the world of archaeology, and how did they shape your approach to your work?
I mentioned already several figures who were instrumental, in shaping my ideas in my education. First of all, my teachers here at Tel Aviv University. Second, Aharoni, Kochavi, and others. Secondly, Dean, the year that I spent with him at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. There were others here in Israel. For instance, my friend Nadav Naaman, he was my teacher and my colleague, and even today we exchange views on and argue. I mean, we conduct our research in the best tradition of arguing and shouting and yelling in each other in a friendly way, very friendly way, very close way. And there were other scholars, some of my friends in biblical studies today, whom I know very well, such as Thomas Romer, such as Konrad Schmidt from the University of Zurich, Baruch Halperin at the time in the United States when I started working at Megiddo, and he was there with me, and I could pose to him questions on the history of biblical research. And there are great scholars, whom I never met. Some of them passed away centuries ago, even, I would say, if you think about Spinoza, Wellhausen, more recently Martin North and Albrecht Alt of the German School of Biblical Research, Biblical Exegesis. So, and the French School of history, of looking at history looking at the long term in history. The French Annales School, Fernand Braudel and others really influenced my research in a significant way.
How has Spinoza's radical views on religion influenced you?
Well, Spinoza, was a genius. And he was the first one to really push the critical way of looking at the biblical text. And I think that we all have to be thankful to him for this. I will never forget, when I wrote my articles my main article also on Chronicles, arguing that the unparalleled text in Chronicles date to the 2nd century BC and should be affiliated with the Hasmonean territorial ideology. And I knew that several scholars were close to this idea before, and I cite them even in my work. But then I discovered that Spinoza said in one sentence, Chronicles is a Hasmonean book. So when you look at this and speak about the 7th century, I mean, it's unbelievable almost. His deep understanding of the Bible, independent of two traditional way of looking at it.
How many PhD students have you graduated, and when did you start teaching?
I don't remember exactly the number. I would say about 25 PhD students. I started having PhD students in the beginning of the 90s. So we are speaking 30 years, 25 students, something like that. But it's not about the number, it's about the quality. When I think about the quality, then there's something I'm very proud of my achievements as a teacher, because many of my students have positions now here and abroad. Let me give you some ideas. Yuval Gadot, who is working in Jerusalem, a professor here, is my student. Asaf Yasur Landau, Haifa, is my student. To mention more, Alexander Fantalkin here is my student. Zachary Dunset in the United States is my student, and I have many postdocs also in prominent positions all over the country. Eran Aryeh, Shirley, these are PhD students, Eran Aryeh, Shirley Bendor, and others. So when I look at the quality of these people, I'm very proud. And I'm sorry if I forgot to mention one. I mentioned 6, 7 of them, and there are 25, of course, but they are all of very high quality, and this is very rewarding.
What kind of advisor are you? Are you hands-on or hands-off?
Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. I am doing both. First of all, I help them, my students, with editing what they are writing. I also have experience as an editor because I served for many years as the editor of Tel Aviv. And I also have a part in bringing Tel Aviv to a dominant position among journals dealing with archaeology of the ancient Near East. But the most important, I think, is the work in the field and in the lab together and discussing things. Let me give you one example. Asaf Kleiman, another student of mine who has a position now here in Israel, at Beersheba. Asaf was, and others as well, was sitting with me for several years in my lab and discussing things with me, attending, my own meetings with other scholars and listening to the discussions, also, of course, in the field. So this is a combination of field, lab, and writing.
As an archaeologist with frequent travel and speaking engagements, what does a typical day look like, and how does it impact your family?
My daily life depends when. Today I am devoting my time between research, and I have still my lab here at Tel Aviv University, the Megiddo finds and so on, Kiryat Yarim, all this is concentrated here. And then I'm also establishing and directing a major new school of archaeology at the University of Haifa, which is a very significant one because we have 4 departments there which cover all sides of archaeology. We are the only ones, here in Israel at least, land, underwater, heritage, and archaeological sciences. So this is a challenge which I enjoy very much. And then, of course, I'm in the field once in a while. There were periods when I was more in the field than today, but I'm still in the field, and this is good. I'm trying to balance the time between, working at home in front of my computer and enjoying the moment of discovery, so to speak, when things all of a sudden click. This is the really happy moment of life when I hear the click in my mind that I understand something in a better way. So both I balance my time between the field and working at home, writing the articles and working in the lab. I'm traveling. I'm trying to, in recent years, to cut a little bit on my traveling because I used to go too much. I'm a little bit tired of traveling, but I still do this. It's enjoyable, of course, meeting scholars, being in conferences, seeing the world. I taught at many places. I taught in Paris, I taught in Tokyo, I taught in Buenos Aires, I taught in Rio de Janeiro, I taught in Rome in the Pontifical Biblical Institute. So I taught, of course, in the United States, at the University of Chicago, in the Sorbonne in Paris. So I have a very, I think, quite a good knowledge of academic life, not only here, but abroad as well. And I cannot complain too much about my life. And I'm trying always, not to disturb my family. The family comes first. When my daughters were young, our daughters, my wife and me, when the daughters were young, there was a rule. I would sit, in some sort of place in the world in a conference, or I would sit, in a very important discussion with the president of the university or director of the university. When there is a call for my daughters, life stops. Life stops immediately, and I answer the call. I never, push the call aside. So family first.
With all your articles, books, and lectures to prepare, how many hours a day do you work, and when do you find time to sleep?
I work a lot. My wife tells me that she has never seen a person working so much, but I don't see myself working. It's my hobby. So let me tell you a story. Many years ago, my late mother, she was, she came from a peasant background in Petah Tikva, a small, at that time, a small town in Israel where I grew up also, a farmer community. And she never understood, this business of archaeology. For her, a person should be a lawyer or a doctor, medical doctor or an engineer, and not an archaeology. This is what they call in Yiddish Luftgeschäft, which means, the things in the air. So she refused to say the word work with my name. So my brother, he worked, he was an engineer, my sister as well. But when it came to me, she used to find the bypass, how to describe what I'm doing. And I was kind of angry about it. 30, 40, 50 years later, I said to myself, well, she was right. I never worked a day in my life. It's all a hobby. I enjoy every minute of it. So I sleep well, and I work a lot. I have this advantage. I'm lucky to be able to concentrate very strongly and write quickly. So this helps, of course, and the concentration and the ability to shift from one subject to the other in a speedy way. And this helps, of course.
Is this a natural ability or something you developed throughout time?
I think it developed. It's both a natural, maybe aspect, natural background of my personality, but there was a big development in this sense.
Do you have any other hobbies except archaeology?
Well, I like very much to travel. I saw the world, I must say, not only during work, also traveling. You name it. I really know the world well. So, I like sports, and that's it. I like reading good books, not professional. Literature.